of us. One of that being just this sense of seclusion and isolation. So really, this is an awesome opportunity for us. So before I introduce you, and I'm going to read your bio, I just wanted to say as well that tonight for Jews, tonight is actually a holiday. It's called Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, and it recalls all of the tragedies that have taken place throughout history to Jews. But for Reform Jews, we've added to that all the tragedies that have taken place for humanity as a whole. And the meaning of this holiday is not just to sort of bask in grief, but rather to use our memories, our collective memories of these points in our history, as a means of really, reaffirming our commitment to our lives and rethinking about how we're going to live our lives. This day is the beginning of the High Holy Day season. So it's the beginning of the season when we have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur coming up. So I think that this is obviously 9/11, which changed us and changed our world forever, is something that I think is an important conversation for us to have tonight. So this is Megan Jones, everybody. Megan is not only the Senior Director of Education Programs at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, but she's also, more importantly, from Shaker Heights, Ohio, which, as everybody in my whole congregation knows, is the most important thing in the world to me. And they are so nauseated by hearing about Cleveland and my love of Cleveland. But you can tell them, this is something that all Clevelanders share, right?
Absolutely. Everyone knows me as the Cleveland person in our office. My office and Browns, Cavs, Shaker, Indians, you name it. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to introduce Megan. Megan Jones is the Senior Director of Education Programs at the 9/11 Memorial Museum, where she oversees the museum's educational programs for school, teacher, youth, and family audiences. She was an inaugural member of the team that conceived, planned, and implemented the education programming for the institution, including student workshops and tours, teacher professional development sessions, the museum ambassador after school program, age-appropriate programs for younger audiences, and the National Anniversary in the Schools webinar. She's presented on the topic of teaching difficult content from the National Council for the Social Studies and National Council for History Education. And it's my honor to have you with us tonight. I wanted to begin by just having you sort of give an opening of how you had this journey to take on this position and find yourself where you are.
Sure. Well, thanks again for inviting me. It's really an honor to do this. And I'm so used to speaking in front of groups and working with students and teachers. And it's been so long since we've been, working from home. So again, I really appreciate this opportunity. So I have an interesting journey, like everyone. And this was not what I had intended or planned on, when I graduated from Shaker. I didn't even know that museums, this was a career path. So I actually, I went to graduate school and started teaching. I worked in secondary education. So I was a teacher for about 5 years. I taught US history, government, law, you name it, I taught it, it felt like. And after about 5 years, I really learned that my passion was with difficult history. So the topics that are really hard to talk about or issues that are very complex, are very challenging for educators, for parents, but are necessary. And so sort of my two passions for history and teaching came together when I moved to Washington, D.C. And I was able to bring those two things together when I became an education specialist at the National Archives. So for someone who's a history nerd, to be able to work in that environment and have access to primary sources is really just a dream come true for me. So I started digging in the records and I started writing and teaching about how you can use primary sources, including oral histories and images to teach difficult content, that you can let people speak for themselves and share those stories and help students really think critically about difficult content. It's less about this is what you should know and more about this is how, not what to think, but how to think. Right. So from there, I actually transitioned to the Supreme Court. So I worked there for a few years. And again, dream come true to be able to sit in on oral arguments and talk to justices and just to be in
Wow.
an environment was really, talk about challenging history. I mean, some of the most, controversial and important topics that we talk about in this country are decided in that in that courtroom and in those chambers.
Yeah.
So, but how did I end up in New York? Which is again a really good question. So it's a story. I've again always been interested in difficult history, and I thought to myself, working at the archives and working at the Supreme Court, trying to talk to young people about some of the more challenging cases, again, was very challenging. And I thought, I wonder what the most challenging topic could be to talk about today. And I thought, I know they're building this museum in New York.
Yeah.
I just am curious what they're going to do. So I went on their website and I saw that they were planning to open in about a year. And there was just this little tab at the bottom that said about, and I clicked on it, and it turned out that they were looking for someone to run their interpretive programs, to sort of design something from scratch. And I thought, wow, we just bought a house in Northern Virginia. Moving was not something that, my husband and I had even contemplated. And when I got home that night, I said, what do you think about New York? And he said, sure, why not? So it really wasn't a part of the plan, but I've also personally connected to 9/11 because my cousin actually worked right across the street and was on his way to work on September 11th, and unfortunately was there and saw the second plane hit and survived that the collapse of the towers. But there was a good 10 hours where we didn't know where he was. So it was also very personal for me, and I wanted to make sure that stories like Brian's and of course the 2,983 victims, their stories were told. So all of that's kind of, I guess, the long answer to your question, but all of that came together and led me to where I am now here in New York.
In New York. And so how many years have you been how long have you been at the Memorial Museum?
For about 6.5 years now. So it's actually, I started my first day, I was in a hard hat and boots. We were on the site, it wasn't open yet. And I remember a moment taking a tour of the museum sort of that was still being built. And, my boss said to me, okay, here's your space. And it was a collection of classrooms with just white walls. And I think that's a moment that hit me where I realized the importance of the work that we were going to do and how hard it was going to be. But again, nonetheless, very important. So I was very fortunate to be a part of something that hadn't been done yet.
Yeah. And by the way, you talk about history and difficult subjects. We have been in our religious school with our 7th graders using the curriculum from an organization called Facing History and Ourselves on the Holocaust. And really, a really fascinating way of kids really grappling with this difficult topic and relating it back to their real, their everyday life. It's so deeply important for all of us. I wanted to, before Megan tells us specifically about her own work and what she does, I wanted to, this was the part where my brother was supposed to be here, but he's got some stupid business thing. So I want to tell a story from my perspective of my niece and my brother and what happened on 9/11. Some of you have heard this story, but I think it's important for all of us to hear. And I think John's even in the video, and Callie as well, right? That we're going to share? Yeah. So September 11, 2001, I was working in Washington, D.C. I was working for a small nonprofit on election reform. And I was in my office when I saw the second plane hit. And I instantly got a call from my mother about 5 minutes after, just checking on me and then telling me that my sister-in-law, who was 8.5 months pregnant, that my brother couldn't reach her. And turns out my sister-in-law, Erica, was literally outside. She worked down near the towers. And she saw as the second plane hit, 8.5 months pregnant. She turned around and walked back towards her apartment, which was on West 63rd. And as she was walking back with everybody else, went into labor. And eventually was driven by a police officer down the wrong way on Broadway, to Mount Sinai, where she gave birth to my niece, Callie, who is now preparing to go to Ohio State University. She's 18 years old. And I remember I came down to visit her on September 15th, 4 days later, to meet my new niece. And I remember leaving Penn Station and seeing the posters that were up for all of the missing people, and seeing a completely dead city, a city that I was used to seeing being completely alive and with life, and driving down these New York City roads that were just empty, except for these signs. And then walking into that hospital and getting to the maternity ward and seeing, behind the glass, this group of babies all born, either September 11th or the 3 days afterwards. And to say it was surreal is an understatement. But I remember my brother calling me when after Callie was born. He called me about 4 a.m, and he said to me that despite the horrors and the atrocities that exist in our world, there's continuing to be life, right? And it gave me and my family this unique sort of connection to 9/11 that my niece decided last year to really embrace. And she got very involved with the museum and with Megan, and actually I think she hosted an event in Shaker, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, this is a very personal subject, and it is one that is something that's important to my family to talk about tonight. So I wanted to make sure I said that before we began. John would have told that story, but I'm telling it. So, Megan, I wanted, before we get, I know you're going to show us a video and you're going to talk about the work of the museum, but I'd like you to sort of give us what is the mission of the museum? What is it all about?
Sure. So the mission is really twofold. One is to honor the 2,983 victims of the September 11th attacks and the attacks in 1993, as well as to accurately tell the history of what happened that day on site, because it's a unique place in that you're standing where the attacks actually unfolded. Was the attacks in New York. So there's that dual mission of honoring the victims and also accurately telling the story. And really the focus has been on this idea as well as 9/12, the what comes after. So it reminded me, as you were speaking about the importance of today, sort of this idea of translating tragedy into acts of compassion or kindness or education. And I will say, just before the video, that sort of, when I spoke at Shaker last year with Callie, she's an example, in my opinion, of someone who has done just that, is able to take a look at what happened in the past, and while she has no memory of it, is dedicated to making meaning of her birthday in a way for future generations. And so that's a lot of what we focus on in education too, is, again, this is a generation with no memory. Yeah. And it's very hard. I don't know if for you too, but for me, I remember it so well that to think that there are students in now high school, that they have no memory, is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, my own son will be in 9th grade this year, and he has no. Of course, he wasn't alive. So
right. In fact, I will say too, there's connection with Shaker is really, I have to say, our president and CEO Alice Greenwald just absolutely loves this story, because again, it's just a random coincidence in how this whole thing happened. Because about a year ago in June, John reached out to Alice over LinkedIn, just saying, my daughter and I are coming to New York, and she was born on 9/11. Is there anything that she could do to learn about the mission of the museum, or is there anything she could do from home in Shaker Heights? Well, the funny thing is, Alice sent that email to me and to another one of my colleagues. And I was reading it. And then when I saw the Shaker Heights, I said, oh, I have to
That's
do
what
this.
does it.
I have to do this.
He had no idea that you were
No.
there.
No, I mean, that's what makes this so incredible, and how
that is incredible.
What started as an email ballooned into something that is so much bigger than I think any of us thought it would be, because so when they came in June, she was a part of our birthday rose ceremony. So if you've ever been and you've seen, there's white roses that are put on the parapets every day. And I will say, even though the memorial's closed in the morning, and the museum is still closed, and there's limited staff, we are dedicated to continuing that program. So that still happens every day. So she placed a white rose on one of the victims' names, who it would have been their birthday that day. Wow. So she did that. We did the tour. And then she said, I want to do more. What can I do from Shaker? And I thought to myself, she would be the perfect ambassador for the museum, meaning why not share this webinar program, which I'll talk about later, with Shaker Heights. That would be great. But it wasn't just that, of course, right? Because then John Kelly and I were on the phone all summer with leadership in Shaker schools, and it turned into what you were talking about, this giant assembly that happened.
Right.
With over 800 people coming, a quartet from the Cleveland Orchestra. And I'm always in New York for the anniversary, but I was able to go to Shaker and talk to the students. Callie talked to them.
Wow.
And it all started with a LinkedIn message. So you just know what would happen. And of course, always the Shaker connection. It's just, but we had no idea.
That is what first of all, it sounds like something John would do. And 9 times out of 10, that kind of stuff doesn't do anything. So, but look what came of it. And, there's a Yiddish word, basheret, which means meant to be.
Yes. So, well, and then of course we decided your story is so compelling, and especially I think for young people to hear from another young person. So we said, John, Kelly, you guys, if you're willing to, would you come to New York in January and film our program? So that's how they ended up being the program for this year. Yes. So the connection.
So this video is for this year, right? This is okay.
Yeah. So, and I will do my best. Hopefully the connection will go well, but if not, I can always just drop the link in the chat if you want to look at it another time. But
that'd be great.
So basically every year we do a program called Anniversary in the Schools. And the idea is to connect young people with people who lived through 9/11, whether they be family members who lost someone, survivors, first responders. Because we find that there's a very powerful connection that can be made to this history when you hear it from the people who experienced it. And it started off as an in-person program. So we sent educators like myself and docents into classrooms in New York. But as you can imagine, the demand was something we could never reach with the staff we have. And also, it's not just a demand in New York, it's across the country. So it evolved into a webinar format where speakers, now, because it's so popular, we record their stories in the museum in front of artifacts. They share their stories. And then on the anniversary, we make the video public. So it is pre-recorded. However, during the day, people like myself and about 15 of my colleagues sit at a computer and we live chat with students in real time. So if students have questions as they're watching, we will respond back and forth with them through a live chat, much like this, to take the pressure off of educators, and we will provide them answers. So it's a live interactive program. And it started off, the first year we had 30,000. Last year we had 323,000 students, 10 countries in all 50 states. So we hope that you might participate as well, because it's evolved from schools to community centers and other museums. So I'd be happy to show you the trailer, which is just a 2-minute preview of this year's program.
Yes, please. It's incredibly powerful.
All right. And let me know.
Let's just make sure the sound's working. Yep.
Yeah, just let me know. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to turn my video off and I'll screen share.
Terrific. I'll turn mine off too.
Here we go. We're rolling. And whenever you're ready, you can just start.
What would I ask a survivor about 9/11? I I'd want to know what the hardest part of that day was.
How were you able to make it out?
What they were scared of most. How are they coping? Does it still hurt?
On September 11th, we invite you to join us for Anniversary in the Schools, a webinar in commemoration of the 9/11 attacks. During this program, you'll hear from 6 ordinary individuals with extraordinary stories from right here at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Join a community of over 600,000 students from around the world who have participated in this program to remember 9/11.
Suddenly, we heard a muffled explosion, and then the building began to tip.
A young fireman comes running in, and he yells, "South Tower's been hit." Now I'm the person that everybody looks to tell them what's going on.
I jumped out of the cab and said, "We're trying to get to the hospital. I think my wife may be in labor." And the next thing we knew, we had a police escort.
I hear the answering machine voice with a timestamp on it, and it says 8:58 a.m. It was probably at that moment that I realized that he wasn't coming home.
You need to understand 9/11 didn't end at midnight or a year later. It's going on 19 years today.
When I came to visit the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, I did have that light bulb moment where I realized that I can make a difference.
Wow.
So hopefully you were able to see that.
Oh yeah, we saw it.
Oh, good.
Very emotional for me, by the way, to see my niece, and my brother, of course. But it's so powerful. So can you tell us? So how will the program? So the program's going this coming year. So if people are connected to a school district that would like to do this, that would like to get involved in this, how do they do that?
Sure. So what basically I played that trailer from from our website. So if you want more information on the program, including the registration link, it's just 911memorial.org/webinar. And again, I can drop that in the chat or send that to you later. But I will say it is completely free. So there's no charge and there's no capacity constraints. The only requirement is a registration in advance, and that's just so we can anticipate how many people will tune in so that the website doesn't crash, essentially. But I can say as of now, we haven't started really advertising it yet. We already have 56,000 people signed up.
Jeez.
So, and again, even if it's just an individual who wants to watch it and tune in, that's also fine. There's no restriction.
Oh, so it doesn't have to be organizational or school. Okay. That's important.
No, not at all. So it can be one person. It could be just a group of people together. For example, we've had libraries screen it and just invite people to come in. So it's very accessible. I will also say that there is a version that will be, will have Spanish subtitles. We have a version for, that is for people with low vision. So there's a verbal descriptive version. And then there's also an American Sign Language version with live interpretation. So we are really, trying to fulfill our mission to make this as accessible as possible.
Oh, it's so powerful. Thank you. Thank you. And perhaps I think our community this year should really think about doing this and organizing something to be involved in this. So, Megan, I want to talk a little bit about just the world today and the world on September 12th. New York specifically, and the world is divided. Our country is more divided than ever, and I do remember the way that this country was sort of brought together after 9/11, and how it standed as a moment of unity. And just wondering if what's the message that you impart to kids about that with all of this.
Sure. So we've thought a lot about that, of course, just the world even before what we're living through right now. And I think with what we're living through right now, that message is also quite resonant. And I think it's an opportunity to explore the reasons why things may have happened. So for example, we spend a lot of time in our programs talking about the repercussions of 9/11. And to your point, there are many positive and wonderful things that came from it, but there are also parts that were not, you know, as community driven or tolerant. Those things did happen, and we have to talk about that. And so we have, for example, lesson plans on our site that we have created that talk about the Muslim American experience after 9/11 and this idea of, you know, just identity in general and what makes us who we are, and then visible identity markers and how perceptions happen just based on how you look. I mean, we go through these exercises to then put them in someone else's shoes, right? To develop empathy, to understand, okay, what was it like to think about being Muslim American after 9/11 and what that experience might have been like. And we use New Yorker covers that were published around that time. We use, you know, FBI hate crime statistics. Like everything that we use is a primary source, including the museum, because I would argue that museums are primary sources. They are the artifacts, they tell the stories. And so, yes, I mean, we do that through lesson plans. We do that through professional development. A lot of our teachers come to us and say, I'm not sure how to talk about this particular issue, or how do I address this topic in the current environment. But I will also say that we try to highlight stories of compassion that show this idea of the coming together that did happen after 9/11. And we've actually tied that to what's happening today. So we have a series of activities on our website now that we've developed since we've been at home, actually, that's tied to ideas of heroism, compassion. So drawing a connection between, for example, first responders after 9/11, not just trained professionals, but everyday people, to what's happening today with frontline workers and how can we pay tribute to that. So we have an activity called Dear Hero, where we ask kids to think about a hero in their own community. And much the same way people came to help others and strangers on 9/11, people are doing that today. So, you know, it's a balance of telling the repercussions, but all of the repercussions, not just one side of it.
Right. And also learning how to deal with the aftermath of tragedy when tragedy hits again, right? I mean, the world we are living in today bears many similarities to the world post 9/11 and the reactions to disaster, both good and bad. Wow. I will say we have about 5 more minutes. So I want to, if anybody would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. Judy Marcus, I see your hand is raised. I can let people, or you can put it in the chat. Why don't we actually do that? Let's put it in the chat, or you can actually text me, 845-729-9021. By the way, 5 months ago, I gave out my number and to the whole congregation. So now any boundary that I used to have as a rabbi is completely gone. So 845-729-9021. Which makes the congregation happy, but not my wife so happy. 845-729-9021 if you want to ask anything. I'll wait a couple more minutes. I think that this, that's from me.
Sorry.
Okay. I think, what have you found, by the way, while we're waiting for a couple questions, what have you found the response to be from kids?
The response to the webinar program?
From kids, the webinar program, yep.
Well, so we've actually asked young people to tell us what they think through social media. So we have a hashtag 9/11 Memorial or 9/11 Museum Ed. So we have kids responding to us directly through that hashtag. A lot of them will respond to the webinar with typically more questions, which I think is fantastic, because my goal is I would love for them to leave this program or the museum with more questions than answers, because then they'll be able to really think critically about what they saw and question or maybe rethink things. So a lot of questions, also a lot of very emotional responses through artwork. So they'll make artwork or write poetry and then post that online. Classes will come together. There's a beautiful photo that we used from last year. A group of 3rd graders from Texas made paper, like tissue paper roses to look like the white birthday roses. And they sent it to us and they asked us to put them on the names of the victims from Texas and also first responders. So I wish I could show you this photograph, but we did. We went out, we put all their roses out on the parapets and we sent them pictures back so they could see that we did it. And then they made us this beautiful banner that says "The Art of Empathy," surrounded. And again, these were third graders.
Wow.
So you get very sort of beautiful and unexpected, responses sometimes. But I think that one, and I think Callie, again, who would have thought that an assembly for an entire community where 800 people would show up? So that was a response from her seeing the work that was being done at the museum, making that connection to her own family. And look what she did with that.
And look what she did. Yeah. So last question. This one's one that I think is near and dear to me. So I went to Yad Vashem 2 summers ago, the Israeli Holocaust Museum, for a seminar for rabbis, teaching rabbis how to teach about the Holocaust. And the message they imparted to us was the necessity of teaching about people's lives. Because too often with the Holocaust, we teach this number 6 million, and it's just the number of people that died versus the actual lives and the stories of the people. So that people realize these were rich lives. This wasn't, the Holocaust, the tragedy of the Holocaust was not just that people died. It was that these lives, these people's lives were taken. I'm wondering if the museum has that kind of sort of outlook on telling the stories of people.
Absolutely. I think the museum is part of the mission, but also for education. To that point, you can say, it's funny, I say this a lot in my presentations when I'm talking to teachers. I say, a lot of times they get frustrated because they don't understand why the students aren't necessarily getting it or having an emotional reaction. And it's because you can say 2,983. But when you tell them the story of a young man named Wells Crowther, who used his red bandana that his father gave him when he was a boy to cover his face and carry people on his back down from the sky lobby to save their lives, and ultimately was on his way back up to rescue more people when the South Tower collapsed. It's, you hear that story and the response is, like you really do see this light bulb moment. So that is essential to our education programs. That's why we do the webinar, because you're hearing the personal stories. Also, and again, I'm not sure if you've been there or not, but you may have seen these images. When you go into the museum, there's a beautiful artwork called Trying to Remember the Color of the Sky on That September Morning. And it's 2,983 individual watercolor paintings in various shades of blue. And I will say that it actually, there's no 2 shades are alike, because no 2 people are alike. Every person is unique. Everybody has a story. And so you see this collective, massive artwork, but then when you get down to the individual square, it's unique from everyone else.
Oh, I love that.
And the last point on that would also be the In Memoriam exhibition, where the photographs of every single person are displayed. And it's very solemn and it's very quiet, but it's also there are opportunities for joy in it, because inside the inner chamber, you hear family and friends telling funny stories about each person, because families wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about where they were when they died, but the life they lived when they were here. And so we really try to, whether it's in exhibitions or in education, impart the importance of the personal story.
Beautiful. This is a quick one. We have one question and only one. So what is the youngest age group that you do programming for?
Well, for school programs, so for field trips, school programs, it's 3rd grade through 12th grade. But we do have, when we are open, we do youth programming, and we have programming for children as young as 2 or 3 years old. Because It's really based on who comes into the museum. And so we want to make sure that we have educational materials for all visitors. So we use artwork and science to help very young children process what they're seeing. So hopefully we'll be able to do that again soon when the museum is open, because we have been closed since March 12th.
But there's a virtual, I mean, you go online, you can do sort of a virtual tour, is that right?
Actually, this is very exciting. So actually myself and 3 of my colleagues, we have been going down to the memorial every day since June. And we offer, and again, if anyone is interested, happy to drop it in the chat, but we do virtual tours, but not the typical virtual tour. They are live. So it's basically through Zoom. So what happens is I'm behind the camera and I have this very complicated robotic arm that we use, so that we're filming an educator leading a tour, but you
Yeah.
can ask questions the same way, either through chat or live. You can just say them out loud and you'll get a response from the educator. So
Oh,
we
that's
move
amazing.
around the plaza, and we're currently working on one for the museum too, for school groups.
Yeah.
So we offer those Tuesday through Saturday. You can sign up, and it's just based on, you know, the number of people, and a connection is unlimited, and you can do an actual live tour of the
That's
space
amazing.
that's closed.
That's amazing. I think it's remarkable how, I don't know if that was created before the pandemic or this was created as a result
No,
of.
we did this in a month.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we too have been nothing like that, but we've been finding different ways of engaging. And I think, pandemic or not, this will change the world, right? I think these new connections, these new ways of engaging each other will change everything. So this has forced us to think outside of the box. So Megan, thank you so much. I feel a special connection to you. So you graduated with like Dan Goldberg. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. He grew up across the street from me.
Oh, that's so fun. I know that the Shaker connection continues. It's been over a year, and we're still finding ways to.
Of course. We can talk about that for now. So thank you. You really, this is such important work that you're doing, such sacred work, and especially for us tonight, you know, when we are commemorating this Tisha B'Av, it's so meaningful just to think about life after these catastrophes in our lives, and how we rebuild our lives, and how we recommit ourselves to living and remembering. So
well, thank you for having me. And when we reopen, I hope that you will all come down to the museum, and I would be happy to give you a tour in person. So someday, please
we would
visit
love
us.
that. We would love that. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you Friday night in person in the parking lot or live streams. Take care. Megan, thank you again.
Bye.
Okay. Good night, everybody.